what's the observation of yourself and your organization in Imo State on Saturday?
One thing that stood out for us was the domineering and the suppressed media space in the state. Throughout the state, it was during, what happens during elections, campaigning, posters of different political parties. That was not, visible in Imo State. It has not been seen. It has been one political party, dominating the media space. And the reports that we're getting from the field was not commensurate with the reports of the media. So that made us to believe that the media space was suppressed. However, happenings in the state, hate speeches, and because, the state already had a history of violence, there were already secessionist activities in the state, there were already destruction, there are reports of political party clashes, hate speeches, in the state, kidnappings and what have you. So that further intensified, the level of violence in the state during the elections. So to the build-up of elections, electoral violence kept building up, it kept increasing, and that made the state and that put the state in a polarized situation, during the election. So on the election day, that affected the turnout of voters, actually. It affected the turnout of voters. So there was various projections that there was going to be violence if, security officials did not strategically deploy, to address these security concerns. So there were already issues, there was tension, there was political tension in the state. There was heavy presence, of the security, of the military, of the police. You had the DSS, there was heavy presence, and they were there, to address the polarized situation, political tension in the state. So they were there on that day, to do that. However, their heavy presence, it could mean two things. They are there to protect the citizens, but seeing a lot of armed security men like that could also have a negative impact. People might begin to fear that it means that the election is going to be, very violent, and that might discourage people from coming out. So that actually affected the turnout, and the political environment was volatile, as at the time was tense. However, the security agents were on ground. They even had a press briefing with the civil society organizations. KDI was presented there, Kimpact Development Initiative, where it was presented there with the media, and they promised that they were going to use the information, the report that they had gotten from civil society. KDI, we had an election security meeting with them to provide our report, the pre-election security environment monitoring report I mentioned. We produced those reports to them, and they used it to deploy strategically during the elections.
There was also sort of a price placed on billboards, by the government. It was quite expensive. Can you tell us some more about that, please?
Yes. Okay. So, what we got information that they were, sometimes governments make laws that could be restrictive. It's an indirect way of suppressing the opposition. You understand? So that's why we didn't see, even apart from Imo State, even in Kogi State and even in Bayelsa, that also happened, but it was more in Kogi and Bayelsa. You had the case of 52 million or about 53 million, around that range, for you to, put up posters. That amount is outrageous. But however, we saw people endorsement. There were a lot of endorsements in Imo State. That was really peculiar and stood out. A lot of groups, a lot of, you see a lot of coalitions, a group of people, coming out to endorse the governor, for the seats for everyone. Even most of those posters that we saw across the state were being put there by different people.
Okay, so talking about that, and also talking about the heavy military presence and the tense atmosphere on election day, would you agree that say that the turnout was quite low from what you observed?
Yes, there was a low turnout in Imo State. One would expect the people. Nigerians are patriotic people. Nigerians, for those that even came out, I want to applaud their tenacity and their patriotism for coming out. However, some people did not come out, and this is not related to the distrust that already exists between INEC and the people. Like, a few months ago in February, we conducted the general elections, and, there were a lot of reservations by a lot of people and different groups saying that their interests were not being captured, that INEC did not reflect the will of the people. However, INEC has that issue yet to resolve. I did notice there was also, in some areas, there were reports that were coming up of pre-filled sheets. Right? People were saying, elections did not hold in certain local governments, and they were pre-filled sheets. There were those reports circulating. And although INEC had come out to say they were going to address those issues were not readily announced before INEC came out to announce the result. Now, this distrust further affects the citizens. So it created lower voter turnout. People didn't want to come out because they didn't believe that, their votes would count. And disenfranchisement too also occurred because some people didn't start. Election relatively started across the three states early, except for Imo. Imo started a bit late. It was about around 9:20 to 9:30. That was when it commenced. And even across polling unit centers, you notice that there was low voter turnout. Another key thing that happened was some DSS were on the field and they had weapons. Okay, so they could have easily interfered if they wanted to. When we get to that, we are going to talk about how security impacted the election. Maybe as we go further, I expect that we'll talk about that.
Let's delve into that because of time. Tell us how you think how security impacted elections on election day.
Okay, it had a positive. Okay, I believe it had a positive, and a negative impact. On the election day, KDI recorded 49 cases of electoral violence. 49 cases of electoral violence. We had 17 cases in Bayelsa. We had 19 cases in Imo and 14 cases in Kogi. Now in Imo State, there were 60 total electoral violence victims that were recorded. Okay, and the perpetrators of this violence were security agents. They constituted about 13% of the perpetrators of the violence. The 44% was party agent, 31% was party thugs. Also, it's important to know that the involvement of security agents does not necessarily mean that it was in the negative light. They were part of the fight because they were trying to address and mitigate, electoral violence that was going on. So the presence of the security created both fear and confidence in the people. Imagine going to a polling unit to cast your vote and you are seeing, for example, about 15 policemen on ground. You are seeing the army there, you are seeing the DSS with guns. It's automatically, as an average Nigerian, considering what's been going on in this country since entered, it creates an instant fear in you. But in another way, they were trying to, secure the environment and encourage voters to come out en masse to vote. So it had both positive and negative impacts. However, I think the security officials really did well. Their deployment was strategic. They were able to, in a way, restore confidence in people to come out and vote. However, unfortunately, we still have cases of violence, like I already mentioned, in different states. We had victims, even some security agents, about 6% of them in Imo State were victims of violence. The voters, unfortunately, 35% of them, yes, 6% of security agents, they were victims of violence. Then 35% of voters, we have in Imo State, 35% of voters were victims, and INEC officials too. There were about 35% of the INEC officials too that were also victims because there were agitations, party agents trying to interfere in the process. And of course, because INEC officials, like the ad hoc officials, the APOs, as is the presiding officers were on ground. And of course, they were not armed, So they were the recipients of those agitations from some political party agents.
I see. All right. Any evidence of rigging?
Okay, like I talked about, the issue of rigging, vote buying is systematic. Yes, there were, in some parts in Imo State, there were issues of rigging. There was domination of on certain wards by political parties. There is this thing around delivering one home polling units by some chairmen of political parties. It's like a thing of pride to say, oh, this person didn't even win his or her polling unit. So you see them intensifying efforts, those polling units, to say, I want my polling unit. So it's like a thing of pride. And this further intensifies contestations among political party, members. Yes.
Okay.